So in this segment, we're going to be talking about the UK facing a potential summer of discontent here. You've got the rail strikes happening currently. They've gone ahead. The government are basically, I don't know if they want this to happen for the culture war. It definitely feels like it. You've got thousands of staff at Network Rail and 13 operators are due to walk out, affecting major train lines. We know that's happening. The government kept saying, making about train drivers who are paid significantly more than the other people who work at the train stations. It's simply not true that this is the drivers who are striking here. It's the other workers, the ones the porters, the cleaners, the ones that make sure you're safely on the platform, behind the lines, etc. It's them. Mike Lynch, the General Secretary of RMT Rail Union, who Kate Burley had a really bad interview with because she was just coming up with absolute nonsense, blamed the dead hand of the government, saying ministers did not allow employers to negotiate freely. Essentially, the accusation is the government capped how much the raises could be for the Network Rail to give to the workers. Essentially, giving them a dead hand, saying they can't actually do anything, especially when some of those workers would be sacked as well under the kind of government proposals. The Transport Secretary said outdated unions were opposing progress. The only person opposing progress is you, big boy. Shap said about 20% of the service were expected to run during the strikes on Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday, focusing on key workers, main population centres and critical freight routes. Services are expected to be affected from Monday evening, with disruption continuing on non-strike days this week. It is kind of annoying because it's trapped with my family members in London for a few more days, but it's one of those things where you're going to back the workers' scenario regardless. The RMT, which represents rail workers ranging from catering staff to signallers, is calling for a pay rise of at least 7%, and that's not that bad considering inflation's at around the 11% mark, I think, right now. The union is said to have only offered 2%, with the possibility of 1% more on the condition that workers accept proposed job cuts and changes to working practices. So essentially what the government said is, we're going to offer you a pittance, we're going to offer you 2%, which is almost 10% below inflation, with the possibility of 1%, depends on how nice you are, and some of you are going to lose your jobs and the rest of you are going to have worse working conditions. Who the hell is going to accept that kind of deal? You'd be insane. 7%, I think they could probably, if they negotiated, they could probably get it down to 5%. It depends on what the workers accept in the end. Network Rail Chief Andrew Haynes said no strike is inevitable until the moment it begins. Well, it has begun, in the words of Dustin Bates, but urged passengers to travel by train only if necessary. A special timetable is out. It's mainly for key workers and people who can't work from home. Talks were held on Monday afternoon to avert the strikes, but the sides remained deadlocked. Lynch said, accusing the government of interfering to prevent a deal. What we've come to understand is the dead hand of this Tory government is all over this dispute, said the fingerprints of Shapps and the DNA of Sunak are all over the problems on the railway. And we've got to remember that, Shapps hasn't actually directly spoken to the trade unions. I don't think he actually has at all. And they argue, the unions don't want to talk to Tory government, when the chairman or however the leader of this union says, we will speak to them. We spoke to Tory governments consistently in the past. It doesn't make it different just because you've got the clowns in charge. This guy will speak to the clowns if need be. He said staff will face with thousands of job cuts, reduced pensions, worse terms and conditions. I mean, reduced pensions there is very criminal, in my opinion, and cuts in real terms pain as inflation soars. And some of these people will be living in London, which is incredibly expensive, with their mortgages going up if they have a mortgage. If they live in rented accommodation, those are going up. I saw someone recently said that their landlords put their rent payment up by £400 a month. Where the hell are you going to find money for that if you don't get a significant pay rise? Lynch said there was also a plan to close every ticket office in Britain. The government have denied this, but with the rise of more online tickets, I can see the government trying to pull a stunt like this. Shapps denied the government intervened in the dispute, saying no ministers have been involved directly in the strike negotiations. But at the end of the day, right, if you're negotiating via an intermediary, which the government effectively are, if you say we're only going to offer this, that intermediary can only offer what you have already said that the government can offer, if that makes sense. You can't go higher than that. In the Commons, Shapps said the government could no longer tolerate rail unions using their right to strike without any regard for how the rights of others are disputed. How about the rights of the workers who are being penalised here because of the fact that the government controls their pay? What about them? Especially when governments, MPs have been getting consistently above inflation pay rises. Maybe you guys shouldn't get that. Maybe you guys, once you fix the economy, you should actually get paid decent money. Because at the moment, you guys have been rubbish. He said minimum service legislation, which requires train companies to maintain a base level of service even during strikes, was part of the solution. What if the workers just refuse? What are you going to do then? Especially when there is a minimum, it's about 20% are still running. So if you are a key worker, hopefully you can get to where you need to go, or an essential worker, however you want to phrase it. So analysis here from Simon Jack. Is the government involved in talks? He says yes. The train operating companies, TOCs, which is an annoying abbreviation. According to the government officials, Network Rail is in theory able to offer a higher pay settlement than the 3% they're offering by shuffling their large complex budget around. Since the government is now also standing as the financial backstop to the COVID-ravaged train operating companies, it is made clear to Network Rail it would not necessarily be prepared to grant the same settlement to the TOC staff, which is the train operating company staff. So it's clear the government have a hand in this. If the government is saying we can't offer you a higher pay rise than 3%, Network Rail is saying we can only offer you this much, it's clear it's the government that have set that out. That has effectively tied the hands of negotiators from government-owned Network Rail by capping the pay rises that could be set. So it's a very clear statement in pink that the government are in control of this. The government may not be in the room, but it's at the table. They've set the table. Shaps said, addressing union members directly, saying your union bosses have got you striking under false pretenses, and rather than protecting your jobs, they are actually endangering them and the railway's future. No, they're not, though. How are they endangering them? If people are reliant on trains, they're going to keep taking trains. It's not like they're suddenly going to learn how to drive and get a car, especially with fuel prices right now and how bad traffic is in cities. He's not done that. The trains will be the future of this country. So he's a fraud in the literal sense as well. And let's not forget, the fact that, the government only offered 2% and massive job cuts as well. It's ridiculous. Labour said if the strikes go ahead, it will represent a catastrophic failing in leadership by ministers, which is true. I wish Labour would do more, but they're trying to not fall into the trap the government has set out, which is the government to pin the strikes on Labour. So I don't fully blame Starmer for this, but again, the Labour Party, it's fine if the backbenchers go out there, I think, because they can say, look, they're doing this of their own accord. Shadow Transport Secretary Lewis Haig said of Shaps, not only has he been boycotting the talks, he's tied the hands of those at the table, which is true. I've got about 5 or 6 notifications on my phone there. There's a bit more here if you want to read that. It's not really super relevant to this. You've got also criminal barristers voting to go on strike as well. It's a bit confusing, but it's down to some of the legal aid cuts the government have come up with. Barristers specialising in criminal law have voted to go on strike in a row over legal aid funding, with several days of court walkouts expected from the week. The Criminal Bar Association, CBA, which represents barristers in England and Wales, have announced the industrial action after ballot of members. This is amid reports of unrest amongst teachers and NHS staff. These are more people that the government have control over financially, in terms of they control the purse strings, how much of a pay rise they get. Joe Sidhu QC and Christy Brimlow QC from CBA said, this extraordinary commitment to the democratic process reflects a recognition among criminal barristers at all levels of core and across all circuits that what is at stake is the survival of the profession of specialist criminal advocates and of the justice system, which depends so critically on their labour, because at the end of the day, criminal barristers are necessary for court cases to go ahead. If more and more of them are leaving the industry, which is happening, it puts a higher burden on the ones that are left and causes more court delays. These people are only human. There's only so many hours they can do, especially given that they deal with very complex cases. Without immediate action to halt the exodus of criminal barristers from our ranks, the record backlog that has crippled our courts will continue to inflict misery upon the victims and defendants alike, and the public will be betrayed. The judicial system right now is very much on its knees. There's a massive court backlog that predated the pandemic. It's only gotten worse, and with the government closing courts and reducing judge sitting days, it's only getting worse. It means cases at which barristers are required will probably have to be postponed, including court trials. And these barristers in the first few years of their profession don't make a lot of money as well. CBA has claimed many of its members are being forced to leave the criminal bar after a fall of income of nearly 30% over the past 2 decades. That they're struggling financially here. It says specialist criminal barristers make an average annual income after expenses of $12,200 in the first years of practice. $12,000 they're making after expenses, and obviously when you include salary, it doesn't always include expenses, but I think they've got a fair bit of travel to do as well. $12,000 for a barrister is not a lot of money, let's be honest here, after expenses, of course. these are people who are, should be treated with a lot of prestige in this country. Evidently, they're not being paid enough, and they're leaving the profession. I don't know what they're going to do, or what they'll do afterwards, but the simple fact is we need them for the judiciary to work. The 15% pay increase we consulted on, which would mean a typical barrister earning 7k more, so this is the Justice Minister speaking, around 7k more per year. And only last week I confirmed we are moving as quickly as possible to introduce fee rises by the end of September. But 7k on top of 12k, it puts it towards just under 20k. But with the rises of the cost of living, is that going to work? These are people who are saying they've been underpaid by around 30% over the last 2 decades. So a 15% pay increase won't cut it. We encourage the Criminal Bar Association to work with us rather than escalate to unnecessary strike action. Again, no one wants to go on strike. Let's not forget, no one wants to go on strike because you become incredibly unpopular, and especially in certain fields like being a barrister, you just increase your workload later on. It's ridiculous. This looks like an interesting article from Marina Hyde, who got some pelters recently over an article she wrote about Rwanda deportations, which the headline was in very poor taste. And I don't think the article itself was great. We encourage the Bar Association, blah, blah, blah. It's nonsense. And if you look at this kind of headline from the Daily Mail here, where it says, summer strikes plague spreads, teachers, doctors, binmen, barristers and postmen could join railway workers in heaping walkout misery upon Britain. Sorry, reading is not my strong suit today. But, if all of these different people go on strike here, because if the railway workers are successful and they get the 7% pay rise they want, or if they get, above 5%, right, or around that number, given that teachers, nurses and stuff like that, they've only been offered a 2% pay rise at best, it will show you that striking works, because it does. And what that means is that more people go on strike because they want better pay. Teachers are threatening to go on strike. I've seen a headline of that recently. And the simple fact is, why should MPs get above inflation pay rises and not anyone else who works in the public sector? It's ludicrous. But anyways, look, I'm going to leave it there. A summer of discontent potentially on its way. And, it's going to be very difficult for the government to combat this when you've got so many different people threatening strike action. What are the government meant to do here apart from actually listen to people? Yes, giving people significant pay rises will add to inflation, but the simple fact is bills are going up significantly. Interest rates are going up. A lot of that money, that is being being made in the economy is going to the top. And the only way to deal with that is through windfall taxes. You have to tax the rich. You have to take money from them. You have to cool down the economy somehow. Taking money from poorer people and lower middle class people, working class people, it's not going to work. All you're going to do is squeeze the economy for longer and make it worse. Austerity is not the way here. Higher taxes on the riches, but and windfall taxes. But this government are full of the most economically illiterate people. I might ask my economics correspondent. I might ask Georgia to do a video on it. Actually, I did ask her. I think maybe that'll come out in a month or two. Might be the next video actually. How to resolve the kind of economic problems we're facing in the UK. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.